In part 2 of my conversation with Chris Miles, we continue talking about diversity in motorsports, or should I say, the lack thereof.
It's interesting that we're able to have this conversation and talk about it. And I don't know where it's going to go and who's going to see it. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is people need to be educated. Here in America, specifically, okay, African Americans account for 38.3% of our population. All right. And by 2013, we will account for $1.2 trillion in annual spending power. You understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
But yet, you walk up and down this paddock, there's no representation. But everyone says, from NASCAR, really NASCAR is the only group that's gotten out there and stepped up for some type of diversity program, love it or hate it, like it or lump it. But at the end of the day, the open wheel community has not embraced bringing along somebody, and the opportunity is there. What I do with my company, Starting Grid, is hopefully going to be able to facilitate some of those opportunities, and it's just a matter of being able to get the education out there. But don't tell me you're trying to expose your brand to a new audience, but yet you don't do anything about it on the easiest and simplest forms.
Here's the thing, though, and I tell you this all the time. You're like the only guy I've ever met that answers his own phone for every call, okay? So you have been out there, and you really pound on the doors. I love the story about how you got hired at Inside Cart. You know, you did the Gordon Gekko Bud Fox thing every day, calling this guy, and he met you and he hired you.
Absolutely.
You have been face-to-face with these people that say they want to do this.
Sure.
Where do you think it stops when you walk out the door? Where does that stop?
Probably the fear factor that it can actually truly happen, and then they either may or may not want to be the ones associated with making the transition or transcending the sport to another level. I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, it goes back to the unknown, but it's just the issue of the excuse. Let me take you back here for a second.
Please.
Me personally, before I did Inside Cart, I was driving, okay? In 1994, I called Ashland Oil after I was hand-delivered to them, okay, for an opportunity in their motorsports program. Valvoline had a huge motorsports program, sponsored a lot of young up-and-coming drivers. In 1994, a gentleman by the name of Mark Coughlin was in charge of that department after Lynn Manley, who went over to England at the time, passed it down to him. I went after Ashland Oil Valvoline. They told me, Mark specifically, told me in 1994 that they didn't have a product to cater to the black community. Now, this is Motor Oil. Now, understand something. This is not the first time I've said this story. This is the first time I've mentioned the name, because now...
Don't we all buy the same kind of things, though?
Basically, I don't think I do the hairspray anymore, but I used to have hairspray that, it was awesome. Never mind. But anyway.
McDonald's, we all go there, don't we?
Therein lies the problem. When I was also racing at the time, I was told there's not any blacks in the stands, so why should we put our money towards you? Well, my response to that always was, if we're not in the stands, we're certainly in the stores, we're in the restaurants, we're drinking the drinks,
and we're watching the TV, right?
Period, pure and simple. And that's the bottom line. And so these gentlemen have constantly and consistently been able to hide behind their title, their desk, their power, their influence, say anything to me on a telephone, okay? What can I do? What do I say? Am I all of a sudden angry black man? How dare you? Or do I really sit there and try and understand what they're trying to do? And my dad always told me, make sure you're bringing something to the table, and always felt that I did that no matter what.
We just celebrated Jackie Robinson Day yesterday. And
Dodgers, awesome.
Yeah, and when I was at Dodger Stadium, I was thinking to myself, here was a man who was the first black man to play baseball. He loved the game, and he said the most important thing in life was to touch somebody else's life.
Yeah,
and
sure.
And he really had to do that with a lot of perseverance and courage. And, I think that's where we are even now. It's going to be breaking through that, just like he did.
Well, absolutely. But see, it also takes a Branch Rickey.
Yes,
all right?
It does.
And that's someone who stood up. Now, Branch Rickey a few years ago in the motorsports world was Dan Gurney. Dan Gurney took Willie T from his exploits over in Europe, okay, where he had tremendous exposure to the European scene, raced against Nigel Mansell and beat Nigel Mansell in Formula Ford, and then came over to the United States and couldn't get a ride. Jim Truman, who Willie says saved his entire career with Red Roof, gave him some money, put him in a ride, and then Dan picked him up, and then the rest is history for Willie. But unfortunately, the quote-unquote pundit said, Willie was a product of his own demise, and this, that, and the other. He stood on the top of his car when he won and did all this. Too exuberant. You know what? At the end of the day, this is a man who enjoyed getting to victory circle,
That's right.
and you can't demonize him just because he wants to celebrate the way he celebrates. You look at everyone else now getting off the top of the cars and jumping up and down and climbing fences and doing whatever. That was just the time. But Willie, unfortunately, I believe was ahead of his time.
Right.
But right now, what's the problem? We're in 2009. We don't have any blacks in the lower echelons of open wheel racing.
Right.
We don't have anyone in the sports car divisions. We have some tinkering around in NASCAR, but I just unfortunately don't believe they're going to really get their true opportunity. And so what's next? Who's going to step up? Who's now going to be our Branch Rickey? I'll do everything I possibly can, but somebody else has to step up.